everyone who's viewing us now or at a later date. And thank you for joining us for this GCN In and Out Digital Festival of LGBTQ Creativity and Sporting Pride event to talk about, I suppose, to start and perhaps sort of really dig into a bit of a very important topic of conversation within the queer community, which is that of body image, and particularly with Sporting Pride on board, how sort of that may present barriers to participation in sports, or indeed how people may have sort of faced negative, either negative stereotyping or indeed felt excluded as a result of particular body expectations. So I suppose this event came about as a result of a conversation between GCN and Sporting Pride about sort of an article which I had written for GCN, discussing my own experiences with body image and my own experiences as a member of the queer community who was trying to fit in, but also felt as if I was sort of pushed out as a result of being slightly bigger bodied. And within the queer community and within society more generally, there is always a link, unfortunately, between thinness and fitness, and an expectation that you need to be striving to be thin in order to be accepted. And you see headlines even as early as this week, conversations about Adele and the fact that she has lost so much weight, and sort of bringing an awful lot of the success that she has had, but bringing it through the focus of, but look at this girl, she was fat once. It sort of is it's a very toxic and negative way to have to live. And particularly if you are a bigger body person, you're seeing this every day and it can have a very negative impact. So I'm joined by two panelists. We're going to have a conversation around, I suppose, the experience of being an active sports person who perhaps doesn't have that sort of expected athletic physique, and sort of like how that is impacted and how they've overcome it, and indeed the positives of being involved in sports and how important it is to be sure that you are kind of, you know, the positives of getting involved in sports and the positives that being active can have for your mental health. So I'm going to ask Leah to introduce herself first. Leah is a prop for the Sale Sharks and has played for Ireland since 2016. I was reliably informed by Wikipedia early today, and reliably informed that she scored an amazing try last week. I won't pretend that I'm particularly a follower of rugby of any denomination, but well done, excellent work, Leah. So perhaps you want to just introduce yourself and say why it is you thought it was important to be part of this conversation today.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Leah Lyons. I play rugby with Ireland and Sale Sharks in England. This is really important to me as a player and as a person in general, who is bigger than everybody else who's probably on my squad and who's around me. And yeah, it's something I do look at as something that needs to be talked about positively, and to help younger people coming up through the years, and even same age older than myself. It is something to look at positively in ways.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Roland, you're an open water swimmer and pool swimmer, an active swimmer, and also you're a member of the Sporting Pride committee. So if you want to just say a little bit about kind of why you thought it was important for you to be here, and maybe why Sporting Pride felt that this was such an important issue to focus on.
Absolutely. Hi guys, thanks for having me. I'm a swimmer. It's one of the few things that I can do well, I think, relatively. And I feel as I get older that I want to do something more, give back to the community in a way. So I got involved with Sporting Pride. And of course, they're working to try and make sports in Ireland more inclusive, more accessible to our community. So seeing that, and then my own personal experience in swimming, even today, I'm not such a bad swimmer, but still feeling kind of aware of maybe not fitting in, being different. And if I can make any sort of positive impact, then I think it's worth talking about.
No, brilliant. Absolutely. It's fantastic. And I think that you guys will be able to bring a very good perspective as people who I suppose are challenging that expected body type and body image, that sort of, the understanding that there's sort of a particular type of person who is acceptable to look like, and sort of having to being anything outside of that leaves you open to an awful lot of criticism and negative comments. And also, I mean, even within sort of healthcare, there's a weight bias. Within media, there's a weight bias. So it's a constant messaging that you need. It is something about you that you need to be seen as sort of less than. So I suppose it would be interesting maybe to hear a little bit about sort of, I suppose, each of our journeys as it regards sporting, and this will be very different for all of us. So I'll share my I suppose my history first, which would be different again to both of yours, and that I suppose I'm not, you were both actively sort of participating in sports throughout your life. It has been a major part of what sort of has been like in your life throughout your past life. So that means that you've got a confidence in that area, or at least have built a wall or a confidence in that area. I, on the other hand, I was overweight as a child and maybe a little bit effeminate, and found myself, I suppose, somewhat marginalized within my school and bullied, and unfortunately that led to a sense of really wanting to make myself as invisible as possible. So for many years I felt like any space I went into was a space that I wasn't welcome or wanted within, and it took me a long time to get to sort of have the confidence to sort of step up and say, no, I'm a person of value. I deserve to take up the space that I'm occupying, and I deserve to be here. It also took me a long time to learn that actually I really enjoy physical activity. I love running. Running is a major passion of mine now. I'm training for my first marathon, which hopefully will be next April if we don't get locked down again. And it's something that I had so ingrained within myself that sports isn't something you do because you are a fat child or because you were a fat teenager. You don't get to play sports. You don't belong here. I remember the first time I went into a gym, the feeling of, you don't belong in this space, that everyone was looking at you. And that's a story that you hear time and again from people. So those barriers get built up from a very early age. And it means that then you are cutting yourself off from very positive behaviors and very positive things for your mental health, for your development, for your social life, because of a fear that's been put into you that there's something about you that isn't right. And I suppose that, for me, looking back now, I kind of think, God, if those barriers hadn't been there, or if I had been pushed into those spaces, your belief in yourself and your own experiences would be very different. So Leah, if you want to tell us a bit about, I suppose, your background in sport, and sort of what keeps you playing.
Yeah, so I suppose I started sport when I was 5 or 6, started rugby, played a load of sports growing up. Our parents would bring us everywhere. I have a twin brother, so the two of us would play every single sport together for the whole thing. So yeah, started rugby, 6, 7, underage boys section in Fermoy. Made my way up through that with him. And the two of us were very similar, dressed the same, absolutely, like same jersey, scrum hat, the whole shebang. And then at the age of 13, there was no women's or girls team in Fermoy. So my dad and a few others, men who had daughters in the club, decided to make up a women's team and a girls team, so we'd be able to progress through the stages. Continued all the way up through that, joined Highfield, who were in Division 1 in Ireland, and then got into Munster setup and stuff like that. And then after a while, got into the Irish setup. So I was quite lucky that way, with rugby. Kind of the other sports kind of died down, and I decided my way and my path I wanted to be was through rugby, and to get to the highest level I possibly could be. And I did that. And over the last 4 years, I've decided to come to England now, and I was with Harlequins for the last 3 years. And now I'm up in Sale Sharks. Yeah.
I mean, I think that obviously we're discussing the challenges faced by people as relation to body image, but you mentioned there around the fact that there was no sort of formal girls team, and it was only through, I suppose, the gumption of your father and those other people to like put you on that path. So your rugby career could very easily have ended at that point because there wasn't a space for females to actually practice rugby. So it's amazing as well to hear that story, so that sort of story as well, of someone who were just like, no, this is obviously a passion for my daughter. I'm gonna make sure that I'm gonna sort of do what I can to help her. And then look how it's paid off. You're now representing your country, which is really fantastic. And Roland, what about you? Your history in sport.
I think I was 10 weeks old, and I was in the water. I was an Aquatots baby, I think was the name. And all my family were involved in swimming, so it was like as soon as I could float, I was put in. It was just kind of second nature. I wasn't given an option to do anything else, but I was fine at the time. It's only in retrospect that you think, oh, I could have been a great recorder, player, or something, you know. So yeah, swimming evenings, and then when I got like kind of starting, let's say, puberty, started morning training, and then there was some, you know, the physical changes. So, and then I must have been effeminate as well, because just I got called names left and right. So that was a bit of a challenge. Every day you knew, or every morning, that if you were going to the pool, there's going to be that 5 or 10 minutes in the dressing rooms. It's going to be very uncomfortable. You couldn't just go and swim and get out. It was always one person or the two lads or some comment or something we passed, and it would just kind of ruin the day for you. But yeah, I mean, I was on Interpro team and Irish development squad, and swam competitively up until I think 17. And then I stopped for the leaving cert, and then that was kind of it. And I only went back a couple of years ago with a different kind of mindset, more about the health and the mental health effects, and kind of doing stuff and kind of being more fearless, I guess. Looking back, you know, you couldn't say, you couldn't do, you just had to kind of go with the flow. But now you can kind of curate how you want to do it. And yeah, so far so good. Doing pretty well.
That resonates with me. I suppose I also was a big fan of swimming when I was younger, and I remember that there is such a vulnerability of going into those changing rooms, particularly when I suppose at that point, you know, I suppose children of all ages cannot be the nicest, and there can be that sense of like mob mentality to pick the person who is the like a little bit different or presents themselves as being a little bit out of the herd in order to kind of make yourselves feel like the insiders. You poke fun at that person. And certainly, like, I remember from that, like you talk about that like 5 minutes either end of being in the swimming pool. I don't know if it would be the same for you, Leah, in terms of that kind of experience when you were growing up, that like few minutes in the changing room before and after, even if you loved what you were doing in between, the anxiety that brought on, because you were having to, you know, quite literally, you were having to reveal your body to these people, and that was opening you up for comments or for looks or for sort of you know, side glances. And you pick that up in the same way all of us pick up the subtle changes in people's body language when we can tell someone is judging us for our sexuality or gender identity. In that exact same way, you are attuned to someone who is recognizing you for being a bigger person, or recognizing you for being a sort of a larger person. And it's something that it's so ingrained in how you live in the everyday world that it sort of is, it's a subtle thing that just like flows under an undercurrent in every part of your life. And when you're a teenager or when you're a child, you are just so sort of attuned to being pointed out as different, because realistically, when you're a teenager, all you want to do is be completely invisible so that no one sees you at all. But that brings on to the next question I want to ask was like, has your body image ever affected your participation in sport? Or I suppose, how have you been sort of being aware of what we were just talking about there, with that sort of, you know, that awareness we all have of our size and of the body expectations that society creates? Did that ever pose a sort of an issue for you? I'll go to Leah first on that one.
Yeah, so I suppose growing up, I've probably been the same size since I was probably 12 or 13, like, and just kind of grown into it in a way. And I guess for myself, I've been lucky enough that I've been able to use my weight in a positive way. But obviously, like, there's always been that negative side behind it, where people are kind of like, well, you need to lose weight, you need to do this, you need to do that. And it's maybe the wrong way of pushing it in the right direction, while you'd have other people who'd come up to you and be like, if you want to succeed and get so far, you need to be doing X, Y, and Z. And it's finding those people who are helpful and who want to progress you in the best way possible and give you the right instructions and give you the better way of looking at it. But I suppose, like, for me, myself, like, we're in the media quite a lot. They get to see every little nook and cranny of us. And I suppose you do look at photos, or you do look at things sometimes, and you go, oh, or people kind of will go, well, you know, she's a bit bigger than the rest of them, or, you know, God, the jersey's a bit tight, or, or even finding kit and clothes that fit comfortably on myself. Like, I hate women's clothes. Like, I don't like them at all because they just stick in the wrong areas for me. Like, that's just my opinion and stuff. So I try to go for men's stuff, or even at the moment, like, I'm quite happy in a t-shirt or a polo if we have to get them with Ireland and stuff like that. And it's requesting then being like, actually, I'd rather not like a size 18, size 820. I'd rather give me an XL of a men's size, more comfortable for me as a person.
I think that like having developed the confidence to be able to ask for that, because you know you're going to feel bad about yourself. And the thing is, I mean, when it comes to like clothing sizes and that, like, there is so few places that actually sufficiently cater to plus size. And by plus size, it's like, it's not even really kind of large. It really is sort of like moderately above average. Kind of once you go anywhere above the kind of like moderately above average, it becomes more and more difficult to find clothes that fit or that are flattering or that you feel comfortable in. And then also there is always that sense of, if I'm wearing something that sort of is a bit more like gaudy or a bit kind of, you know, more sort of loud, I'm bringing attention to myself. And you've been trained over years of having those people comment on you in social media, or having those people pass those comments to you on like apps or whatever you're on. You're trained to kind of be aware that, you know, if you put yourself up too much, you're going to end up having someone have a negative comment. Say, what about you on that, Roland?
So yeah, I can remember when we were kind of kids, early teenagers, and, you know, it was the new season, you'd get new gear, new togs, you'd have to put in your order. They were coming around with sizes, and it was always the thing, like, who had the thinnest waist. And when I think about it now, it's kind of crazy, like, you know, it's, oh, you're better because you're a 26 and I'm a 28. So like, I don't know if this word is said anymore, but like, to be lanky in swimming, like, he's very lanky. To be that and if you weren't like that, then you were flawed. Like, I remember, like, my dad was measuring, or the coach would measure in the pool, or the lads, who's taller, you know, whoever's the tallest, then you were sure to do better. And if you were a smaller person, then you just might as well give up. So that was always in the air, in addition to the whole gay thing. Do they know? Can they see into my mind? Do they know my big secret? And it's changed a little bit now with, you know, being older and, you know, taking accountability and responsibility and stuff like that. But I still feel the effects of, you know, like, if I go swimming, I'll go into a cubicle, or, you know, the towels around me, and I'll try to choose the invisible option up until I can get into the water. If I can be invisible up until I'm in the pool, I'm happy out. You know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's kind of been my my experience of that. And I think that it's those choices that you feel pushed to make, those choices to like make yourself more invisible, try and take yourself out of the eye line of other people, that they, like, even though they're subtle and they're small and they really don't add up to kind of an enormous amount of change, it's how it makes you feel about yourself. Because almost like, I know that sort of same feeling of kind of like, I'll look for the cubicle, or I'll, like, you know, I won't try something on in a shop because I want to go to a changing room for it. Like, there's always like a voice in your head that's telling you you've been defeated by this. You've been, you know, you're somehow letting yourself down by not kind of, you're sort of like simultaneously screaming at yourself that you should be sort of proud enough of yourself to be over this stuff, but then also telling yourself that because you carry this extra weight, or because you look this particular way, you somehow are a failure. And like, that's baked into you because of the messaging that's been repeatedly given to you over years and years and years of just existing in a world where, as you said, those sort of thin, lanky bodies are looked at. And you know, that's not to say every single person, everyone who has a body has body image issues. Everybody who has, like, people who will have things about their body that they aren't comfortable with or don't like. But I suppose when it comes to weight shaming, weight stigma, and fat phobia, it's a particular type of sort of across society permission to be cruel to someone, to be able to bring someone down. A sense of, say, for example, as you mentioned, Leah, that there will be people who will feel free to kind of say to you, oh, you need to lose weight. You're already at the very, 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 very top of your game. You're representing your country, and someone will come up to you and say, oh, actually, what you need to do is this. You need to lose weight. And it's not, you know, the fact that they feel entitled to say that to you, but wouldn't necessarily feel entitled to offer their opinion to a team member of yours as to what they need to do to, in their minds, sort of fit a particular that particular box. But on that one, I suppose it would be interesting to hear, have you ever experienced prejudice related to your physical appearance in that sports setting? I'll go to Leah. I'll go to you again first. Sorry, I'm going all around the screen in this way. I should be mixing it up, but I keep on.
It's all good.
Yeah, so I suppose for myself, it goes back to media. It goes back to that online shaming of, like, I remember moments when there was headshots of basically a World Cup we were going into, and they headshotted each of us on social media, and the comments below, like some people's and my own, it was just staggering to see what people could write or could say, and then it's not having actually, it's been like, oh, look at her, or like, geez, Jesus, look at that, like, and you're kind of like, well, yes, I understand I'm big, I'm probably, yes, I should lose weight, I understand that as well, and I'm doing my best at the moment, but I'm obviously doing something right, that I'm able to train and to play for my country, and I'm very, very proud of that, and I'm very honored to be given the privilege and the chance to do that. And I suppose another time and event where that happened, we were playing a match, and I'm very lucky that my family support me all the way to every single game that they can make, and they heard some man in the crowd basically call me a heifer, and they reiterated it to me back when I was going home with them in the car. And I kind of thought about it for a while, and I was like, why or how does someone have the right to call me that during a match? Them to overhear it, kids around to overhear it, friends and family and fans that come to the matches. This should be a positive occasion for us all. We won that day, and at the end, that's what matters to us, and for the jersey and everything like that. And these people going around and saying, left, right, and centre, and you're just kind of like, there's a moment and a place for all that, and this isn't the place.
It's extremely disheartening to hear that as well, because I suppose that will have put it for yourself. Obviously, that will have added it will have tarnished to a degree, perhaps the experience of that day, knowing, because it sort of brings to life then what you're seeing play out on the internet, and the internet is a very callous place, and people feel free to comment and to say exactly what they want to say underneath a picture of someone. They never think of the impact it's going to have, not just to the person about whom they're making the comment, but to the people who are reading it as well. Because I suppose if you're making a statement out that is sort of saying that an individual who you assume is bigger bodied, or assume is that you assume is not sort of the correct body type, you're not just saying that directly to that individual. Everyone else is seeing it. People are seeing that and then are picking it up, and they're going to be bringing that back into how they value themselves as well. And so, Roland, I'd be interested to hear if you've had a similar thing, because I suppose swimming is such a sort of revealing pursuit.
Great reveal, yeah. I mean, everything's out there, and I can't say that anyone said something direct. Sometimes you think it, but then I don't know if that's just having a bad day, you're in a negative place, so you're just writing everyone off. But I will say, like, when you look at the advertising or the pictures, the images around the sport, they're not reflecting the reality. Like, if I go to a swimming competition in Ireland, or I go to an open water event, you're going to see every type of body possible, and I will say more on the larger side. Being large or overweight or having more fat is actually an advantage in swimming. It keeps you higher up in the water. You travel through the water faster. But you don't see that reflected, if you walk into a swimming pool or an ad for a gym. They're using the models that probably can't swim or don't do any sports. They're just not eating. It's not reflecting. So nothing direct, but there's still lots of little reminders around that kind of advertise that, that's what swimmers should look like. This is what I look like. So there's some disconnect. There's something, we're not talking to each other. There's something not right here,
That's an interesting, I think that's an interesting thing to bring up. First of all, I think that there's plenty of studies out now to say that sort of this myth that sort of thinness equals fitness is something that has been completely disproven. And there's plenty of studies now on sort of the health of sort of overweight people who are very physically active, and that's sort of, if you're using this BMI scale, that's basically it's BS. It doesn't really measure anything. That if you are physically active and if you are physically capable and you're out and you're participating in sports, that you're going to be equally as healthy as a sort of a slim or athletic person. But the problem is that the way society looks at this is that there is an ideal body type, and if you don't have it, no one wants to hear that, because people are so used to this just constant kind of having something to sort of throw back and having something that they can say about you. This is my experience. One of my earliest experiences of swimming again as well was I went to a school that had a swimming pool, and I talked about this in the article which I wrote for GCN. But at one of our sports days, I was part of a swimming relay team, and I overheard the two other boys that were on the relay team with me complaining to the swimming teacher about having been stuck with the fat lad. And the swimming teacher basically said, look, just put him in first and hope you can make it up. So he was essentially agreeing with them. Now it is also, I suppose, in that, like, wrapped up in that, and you've mentioned identity and your sort of the fact that you were also hiding the fact that you were gay, but wrapped up in all that was you already felt like an outsider because you were having to sort of conceal your identity. I was already an outsider in that school because I was trying to conceal my identity. And I'm sure you could relate a bit to this as well, that there's this additional secret. So you already feel like you are kind of a bit of an outsider, and then other things arise that make you more of an outsider, and it just really acts on those vulnerabilities for you. And I think it can then that sort of damage lasts for a lifetime, and it really is hard to overcome. So what I'd like to ask you about now is what could be done to sort of try and create safe spaces within sports, and what would you like to see to encourage people sort of who may feel like they don't fit a particular mold to start coming, particularly within the LGBT community, to try and drive that uptake? What do you think we could do to try and promote that uptake of sports for people who maybe think that this space isn't for them? And Roland, I'll go to you first.
Cool. I think things like this, having the conversation, things at a grassroots level, I am curious, to be honest. Let's say the non-swimmer's perspective, if somebody's out there, somebody's listening, and they had an interest in swimming, how are they feeling? Like, do they feel like, no, I couldn't do that, I couldn't just strip off into my Speedos? And that's the information I think that we need to know, and then create something that's more accessible and inclusive. And I know that's kind of the mission of Sporting Pride. I also know that Sport Ireland are trying to do something. They have a big survey going out at the moment as they're writing their inclusion and diversity policy for that. It's a 5-year plan or something, and it's a big survey, lots of questions there about body image and stuff like that, so that they can then filter down to maybe working with clubs or have guidelines. Like you mentioned, the swimming teacher kind of just supported the negative thoughts when you were a kid, things like that. The training needs to be done maybe for people in positions in sports. We need to identify, people, if they have an interest, but they feel like they can't access, how we can kind of get them over the barrier and into the pool or onto the pitch or onto the court and getting active.
Yeah. And Leah, I suppose you have made sport such a big part of your entire life, and it's obviously something you've now had amazing achievements with, and probably it's something like it's a part of your life, I'm sure, that you are spectacularly proud of. So what would you say to people who kind of feel as if there's a barrier there preventing them from getting active, looking into joining a club, or even just participating in physical activity to a level just personally themselves?
Yeah, I think most clubs are open to people coming in, trying new sports. I think it's one thing that I've seen kind of going around the place, being in different places, that like I'll always go back to rugby because it's my home basically, but it's always been great to see so many different people join rugby, whether they play other sports, whether they're tall, they're small, they're big like myself, you know, like you have that diversity in rugby and in that sport. And I suppose it's coming in, it's having watched a training session, it's education as well to people who are around to understand that, okay, anybody can do sport, you know, you don't have to be good, you don't have to be bad, there will always be somewhere for someone to play, or some sport that will click, maybe, you know. And like there's always opportunities around the place that people can literally just go in, have a go. I know Irish rugby do give it a try, so it's go into clubs and have a try for a day, you know, see if you like it or not, and you don't have to go back if you don't like it, and if you do, great, join the sport, you know, that kind of way.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And again, I know through Sporting Pride, obviously you work with a number of the queer sports teams around the country. And if you're based in Cork, there's the Hellhounds, in Dublin there's the Warriors for rugby. And I know that sort of for myself, actually, although I was absolutely not a competitive person, and found the sort of that whole side of when I followed a group of friends and joined the Emerald Warriors, despite the fact that it probably wouldn't have been, and it didn't turn out that the sport itself captured my imagination, but taking the step of going into that space, it pushed me down further a road of kind of getting involved in going to the gym, and brought me more joy in my life. I made some absolutely amazing friends through it. So even if you are just sort of casually kind of thinking, I need a way to start trying to build a life that doesn't revolve around pubs, doesn't revolve around clubs, having a sports team or being part of a sports team is a really excellent way to do that. I'm going to move on now to kind of talking about the experience of, I suppose, of bigger people within the LGBTQ community. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was the idea of weight shaming within the LGBTQ community. So I can speak, and Roland, I'm sure you can speak as well, in terms of from the gay male sort of gaze, that there is very sort of, there's a permission slip written within the gay male community to just sort of be extremely cruel and hypercritical of people who aren't meeting a very particular specific body type. And if you do happen to be overweight, you're kind of pushed into one particular corner. You can find yourself fetishized, you can find yourself rejected or pushed out or marginalized in a way that sort of is extremely cruel, and will only serve to play on and reinforce those negative stereotypes or those negative opinions of yourself that you will have developed as you were growing up anyway. But I'd be curious to know, I suppose, Leah, in your experience, in what I hope you're going to tell me was a much different and much more accepting and wonderful world.
Yeah, I suppose I haven't had much experience with the whole kind of put into a group and stuff like that. I was quite shy, quite kept to myself quite a lot of it, and obviously concentrated on my sport quite a lot. But I would imagine there is a massive, like, individual different side of it where you know, weight and looks and who you are and where you're from and what you sound like, there's always going to be that little bit of a rift in the middle of it. But yeah, I've been probably sheltered to it all, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. With that, I think as well, if you're walking into a space as a rugby star, then you're possibly you get the benefit of shining brightly.
Yeah, I'm
like
probably a very lucky person that way. Yeah.
But Roland, what about yourself? Like, what would your thoughts about that sort of side of things be?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely remember when, let's say, Grindr came out in 2009, I think, maybe, or 10. I mean, it was revolutionary, but I do remember and I was living abroad at the time, and I do remember all the labels, know this and know that, and, you know, I just thought, okay, you know, maybe it's for efficiency, they don't want to be rejecting or whatever. I didn't agree with it, but I did have, you know, several encounters where, you know, I guess the picture was better, and then they saw the real thing, and it might have been after the activity, but, you know, there wasn't a follow-up encounter, let's say. And I do remember once or twice the reason being, oh, you know, too fat, you know.
Yeah. it's very blunt in that way, and it reinforces and plays on those sort of opinions that you have about yourself. And I think a lot of time when someone, whether it's through the apps or romantically, or even just say, as you were saying, Leah, people like offering their opinion on your size, on like the side of the pitch, like it's only playing into what you've been told to believe about yourself all along. So it's kind of coming and reinforcing that. So when someone says, it's like, I know certainly from being on the apps, you do see that the language is somewhat changed now. People aren't quite as outright and saying no fats, no femmes. Like that sort of language has moved on a bit, but it's moved into a more coded space now. And if you go onto the likes of Grindr or Scruff, you'll see people who will say, oh, I'm a fit person just looking for another fit person to hang out with. And I'm like, well, I could message you and say, I'm very fit, you know, but I'm guaranteed I'm not the sort of fit you're looking for, you know. And it's sort of, it is that kind of like it is that kind of I suppose coded messaging to people of your value within this. And I think within the gay male community as well, the hypersexualization of sort of our particular part of the community means that sometimes, you know, your appeal or ability to get access to sex becomes the thing that defines your feeling of success as a gay man, which is a dangerous thing and gets very mixed up then into kind of feeling that you need to look a particular way, achieve a particular sort of type of look in order to actually have any value at all. But I suppose, have you seen any other people having sort of that, like experiencing that kind of weight shaming within the community, Roland?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know friends that would be larger. I know friends that would be very thin, and both scenarios they are probably personally bothered by, but maybe they can't do anything about it, and they would have gotten some comments, you know, some digs and stuff, and I've heard stories, and it's just kind of like, you know, the wounds of being LGBT, and the people say stuff that, you know, say things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's like a lot of people have gotten something, no matter what shape you're in, you know. Or like, I know people, and you think, oh, they're stunning, beautiful, oh, they must have it easy. You know, if they go onto Grindr, it just must seize part. But yeah, they would tell me things as well, like and bad experiences, or people, you know, getting ghosted, or people would disappear. And I'm like, but you're so nice, you look amazing. You know, it's like everybody has a similar story.
But I do think it comes back to a need, I think, within the queer community to perhaps look at how we treat each other. I know in GCN's last issue of the magazine, they had the Proud AF campaign speaking about different people from within marginalized communities who sort of feel pushed out of pushed out of what should be our shared and safe spaces. And I think that when I was reading through that, I very much felt like sort of bigger bodied people and larger people sort of have a voice in that space too, because we do find ourselves continually told that we are taking up space that we don't deserve. There is a permission slip given to people to pass comment on us purely because of the way we look. There is a sort of an assumption that naturally we must be unhealthy, or there must be something wrong with us just because of the way we look. And the other thing I think that it is important to say is that even if someone chooses to have a diet that you would consider incredibly unhealthy and chooses to never exercise a day in their life, that doesn't give you permission to be cruel to them. They still are a valid human being who deserve respect and deserve to be treated with respect. So it's, you know, it's important to encourage people to become active, because it has such a positive impact on your mental health, and it can be such a positive force in your life. But if you don't choose to do that, you're not any less valid or valuable just because you are a bigger person who doesn't want to participate in sports as well. I think that is an important thing to see. Part of the problem I think that we've addressed as we've been coming through the evening is that a lot of the messaging that exists around kind of bigger people tends to be very negative. And, you know, that messaging that you get through the media and through TV and movies and that. So what would you say, kind of, do you think that kind of messaging, like how does that impact a person's sense of self-worth? And have you yourself sort of seen bigger people represented and thought to yourself, well, this is me they're talking about? And Leah, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always it's a benefit when someone comes out and kind of goes, yes, look at me, I'm me, I'm happy, this is who I am. And I suppose it's one of those things that, if people can highlight it and accept it, and as I get again, it's educating people around body awareness, shape, sizes, about who they are, and what they can. It's people understanding basically that this is me, this is who I am, and
Yeah.
how it works, and all that, really. Yeah.
And Roland, what about yourself?
Yeah, like I think this maybe the second or third biggest swimwear company doesn't do men's sizes over 34, 36-inch waist, which is kind of crazy because when you're comparing it to other brands, they'll go all the way up into the 40s. The last couple of years, I've seen, let's say, two of the biggest swimming companies do like Pride collections. So it's something, there's something's going on maybe in HQ. They are trying to, I hope in a positive way, reach our community, not just kind of sell some merch during the months of June and July. But yeah, like I just think we need to put pressure on maybe if we see that we're not being represented, then we need to say or ask why we're not being represented,
Yeah, and I think that you bring up an interesting point about the pink washing and the fact that like you will see these brands that will come along and say, oh, we're going to do a Pride collection, but then that Pride collection will only incorporate sizes that are sort of for a very sort of select group of people, and part of that is going to be, part of that is going to just be a blind spot on their mind about the fact that that people can be larger than that and want to participate in whatever activity that they might need the stuff for. But the other side as well, I suppose, will be that from their brand, potentially from their branding or marketing side, they're going to want Instagram pictures of highly athletic looking people wearing their clothes, and they're maybe not necessarily going to care or want people who don't look a particular way, sort of to cater to that group of people. And I think that, if you look through TV shows and the fitness industry as well, like this messaging that, fit equal or thin equals fit, and that it's the only objective that you can have as a human individual is to try and become this particular kind of, sort of athletic, highly sort of, professional sports bodied person. It's an important message to do, because they are to have, because they need to continue pumping or creating content around it. Like I think it next month or the month after next, the next season of Operation Transformation will start on RTE. And this again is one of those programs that goes into the point of taking a person who's in a bigger body, telling them that the thing that's wrong with them is the fact that they're fat, and then forcing them onto restrictive diets that don't work, pushing them to do exercise regimes that potentially they aren't capable of, and then shaming them if they don't lose a particular amount of weight towards the end of a week, rather than celebrating a person deciding that these are changes that they want to make themselves, or that these are this is something that they would like to do themselves. So the next thing I was going to move on to, I suppose, would be around kind of like health promotion, and what steps would you take to sort of, in the last, I suppose, 2 years, we've had a very challenging period of time, and what steps have you taken in the last 2 years to kind of look after your own mental well-being? I'll go to Leah first.
Yeah, so I suppose myself, like personally, I found COVID and lockdown completely, absolutely crazy, stressful as hell, and like emotions through the roof, nothing happening, being literally locked up. But for myself, I think what I did straight away, I was in England, and I got myself a job in Tesco's. So I literally went straight out, and I was like, I need to work. I think I took 2 weeks off, because rugby finished, everything was locked down, nothing was moving, nothing was happening, and I decided to work, and got delivery jobs. So I was driving around the place, happy out in store, nearly 24/7, just to keep myself occupied. And for myself, my methods are to keep myself as busy as possible, to whether it's just cleaning, cooking, doing something like going for a walk. It's something that's massively important for me, because otherwise I'm like, I stop and then I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? And my head just completely goes everywhere. And unfortunately, like, I've had to deal with that so many times, and negative times, and try and turn them into positives. And yeah, the last 2 years, started working, moved clubs, been back and forth to home when I can, and try and see my family as well. That's a massive important part for me at the moment as well. Yeah.
And how were you able to continue sort of training, or kind of how did you weave that sort of like physical activity and physical exercise into the last period? Because obviously you wouldn't have been able to train as part of a team during COVID. So how were you keeping that side of things going? And also it'd be interesting to ask, because sports is part of your kind of professional sort of career, or what you're doing kind of almost as part of a job. Do you still get the benefits, or do you still participate in a kind of like for that mental health kind of side as well?
Yeah, definitely. The start of COVID, I was like, yeah, I'll do this. Let's go. This is class. And literally, I think a month into it, I was like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing it? I questioned everything, because there was nothing to build for. There was no matches. There was no training. If you were training, I was quite lucky. I was living with a couple of girls who were rugby girls, so we got a few weights and stuff like that and did a few sessions together. But after a month or two, my head and my body were like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Then we get back into preseason, and it was like the biggest kick up the ass for me possible. That it was like, right, this is why we do it. This is why the sport means so much for us. And yeah, it's something that's always helped me mentally, just to keep going, keep being fit, try and move myself around as much as I can. Yes, I do understand I need to do a hell of a lot more work than probably what I'm doing, or change a few things to make me the best person I can be. But at the moment, this is the way it is, and it takes time to generate and make yourself the best possible version of yourself. So yeah.
No, absolutely. But also be kind to yourself, because we can all strive to be the best possible version of ourselves, but we need to be nice to ourselves as well. What about you, Roland? Kind of what have you been doing over COVID, and how have you managed that, particularly with your physical activity?
Same as Leah. Like, I found it very tough going. I was only swimming and nothing else, and that was perfect. And then with the lockdowns and stuff, pools were closed, and the next day I go on Instagram, and everybody's doing their home workouts and uploading home workouts left, right, and center. And I was like, Jesus, okay, but let's try it, not for me. Tried running, not for me. Like, I just love my swimming. Just, that's all I want to do. So the transition period was a bit of a pain. Also, swimming is very lonely in a way. When you get in, you can swim for 2 hours and you mightn't say a word to anybody. So it was very quiet during that time. So I started counseling, just to talk, share, different ideas and stuff. I had been putting it off for years. And I was like, okay, this is the perfect time. So that was kind of turning a negative situation into a positive. And then I did try and maintain a bit of running as well. But I just didn't really enjoy it. And then the pool eventually opened, and then I felt like that downtime really kind of built up a energy, a fire. Because I think since the pool's open, like, I've been training really well, swimming better than ever. I would previously I'd skip, or I won't bother, or next time, or the day after, or whatever. But now it's like, okay, no, you had your downtime, you're not missing the sessions, you're not wasting any time. Really got to love it more because I missed it. So it kind of has a silver lining.
And I think what you said there is really, really important, because you do see, like, a lot of the messaging around kind of getting active and getting out there is that it has these positive mental health benefits, and it does, hugely so. But that in and of itself, particularly when you're in a particularly stressful sort of time period, won't necessarily be everything. It's not going to solve all your problems. You can't just go for a run and then sort of, you'll be happy out. So I did the same at the beginning of lockdown. I was like, right, I'm not going to be able to do this. So I decided I started counseling as well. And I found it incredibly useful to have that sort of almost a facilitated conversation with myself every week, a space to really reflect. And then then I get to go out, I get to tie up my laces and go out, and I go for a run off around the countryside. I've got Little Mix blasting around the place, and it's great. Like, it's both of them work together to kind of help you feel much better about yourself. And I think that looking for that help and being open to conversations about kind of like what it is, why it is you feel a particular way, it makes it easier to kind of understand your own value, your own worth, and then challenge when you feel other people are kind of trying to put you in a particular box or casting you a particular way, especially if it's to do with the way you look. So the next thing I was going to ask would be your kind of, what encouraging words would you have for someone who's been avoiding sports due to the struggles with their body image? Roland, I'll go to you first.
I think about the period when I wasn't swimming up to the point when I resumed again in 2017. So there was 10 plus years. It was, I have to give credit where credit's due, it was the support of a friend. I did try, go to the pool by myself and do my own thing, and it can be very isolating. It is as a sport anyway. No social element. But I was sharing, I guess, my thoughts with a friend, and she was like, you know what, let's go together, let's do it. And that really helped. So I would just say, if you want to do something, maybe share that want with somebody you trust, or somebody you think might kind of get you to the front door or something, just that you might need that little push or that crutch. But then once you're in there, because that's what happened, like I thought it'd be a once-off, and we swam. It was a pay as you go session, and we went in, laughs and giggles and stuff. But I did know after I finished the first length, I'm like, oh, this is it. This is like a perfect fit. I'm back, kind of thing, But it was so funny, like, to get to that place, I kind of needed help, and thank God that person, because if I didn't go, I'd have never gone back swimming.
And do you think that this is me getting my Oprah moment, but do you think part of your not going back for a period of time was to do with body image and to do with kind of a fear around?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And Leah, what about yourself? Sort of what encouraging words would you have for someone who might be putting off getting involved in sports, and particularly, I suppose, rugby as a sport that's very inclusive in terms of people who are members of the LGBTQ community?
Yeah, definitely. Like Roland said, friend, like so important. It's someone you can bring with you who you trust, and you're kind of like, okay, let's go, let's try it out. If we both don't like it, okay. If we like it, yay. Because there's always that social element as well, that in sport that you have that, sometimes they'll go for a bite to eat or go to a pub and have a drink. There's always extra bits outside that sport that will then kind of make it feel a bit more involving and more inclusive to people. And trust yourself, back yourself, put a bit of motivation and self-belief into yourself. If you want to go do it, you go try it, and there's never a wrong answer, there's never a wrong place that you'll put yourself in. If you try it once and you don't like it, don't have to do it again. And if it kind of tickles your fancy, then have another little shot at it. Yeah.
And it's great when you meet, it's great when you meet somebody that shares the same interests. Like, a lot of my friends now in Dublin are also swimming and swimmers. And, we're gay, and it's just awesome. Like, all this crossover, and we passion for the water and stuff. It's amazing. It's really just that kind of initial step, getting to the door, getting over the wall. And then, it sounds really cheesy, but it does really get better, know?
No, absolutely. And it is like that, getting to the door. And I suppose, as we spoke about today, that it can be different people with different challenges. It will take more courage to potentially get to the door, finding that space. If you've come from a history of feelings like you don't matter, or your size defines you in a very negative way, it can take a lot of courage to get to that place of taking a step, finding a friend, finding someone to to go with is a really powerful way of doing it, but also knowing that there are clubs out there, particularly within the LGBTQ community, who are so encouraging of absolute beginners coming in. They want people to come in. They want people to get involved. Their focus is on making people active, getting people to meet, to find their tribe, exactly as you described, Roland. I'm going to ask one more question because we have to finish up now in a few minutes. And I'm going to answer it first to give you guys a chance to think of an answer. But it is, what one unhelpful thing that people who don't understand body issues would you like to say, stop doing that? And my one would be, if I'm talking about the fact that I have body issues, telling me, oh no, but you're very handsome. That's I didn't say I wasn't handsome. I said I had issues with my body. So thanks for making me think I should feel I'm not attractive. So that would be the thing that I would say to people, to be careful when someone is expressing concerns about or expressing feelings about their body. Listen to them, allow them speak, and don't try and sort of diminish or dismiss them, particularly in a way that insults them in a whole different way. Roland or Leah, I'll let whoever wants to come in first come in.
Yeah, I'll just jump in because I had that same conversation like a week ago, and I was actually doing some research on toxic positivity. And a friend, I was saying like, oh, I feel, in that picture, did you see? I was like, my stomach is just sticking out, and I'm like, oh Jesus! And he's like, oh no, would you go away, whatever? And I'm like, oh, you know what you just did? That's an example of toxic positivity. just let me moan, just let me out. You don't have to do any damage control, nothing. Just let me, So yeah, exactly like what you said,
Yeah, I suppose for myself, I'd probably. I think I have said it before, but people like go lose weight, and I'm like, if people could just say it, like go get fit, go, let's try something new. If you need help, I'll help you. It's so much easier than being like, you're not that they'd say you're fat, but like you're basically going, well, that's, I know what you're saying, but if someone's like, go get fit, if you need a hand, we'll find a way, we'll source a way. It's easier to have people have a bit more understanding of how they word it, rather than just first thing that clicks into their head and then they're like, boom. And you're kind of like we'd understand the situation straight off the bat, but it's try and make it a bit more positive, more constructive.
Yeah. And I think wrapped into that is understanding the impact of what you're saying, understanding that kind of, if someone is, perhaps there's a time and a place for a conversation. If you feel like a person could benefit from, for any number of reasons, becoming more active, finding a way of having that conversation that doesn't start from a place of judging them for the way their body is always a good place to start from. So I think we've more or less come to the end of our event, at 58 minutes and 35 seconds, perfectly timed. So I'd like to say a massive thank you to both Leah and to yourself, Roland, as well, for sharing your experiences. It's not easy to talk about something that is so personal, and something that often it comes from a very deep and wounded place occasionally from inside, but it's very important. And I do hope that anyone or everyone that is watching this finds some value in the conversation that we've had. And if they need more or would like more, to know more, get in touch with Sporting Pride about the different queer sporting clubs that are available in Dublin. I'd like to say a huge thank you to GCN for hosting us tonight as part of their In and Out Festival. And just say to look out for the Sporting Pride Let's Get Visible campaign, which is going to be coming out in the next little while, which is going to really focus on sort of body positivity within the queer community, and particularly as it relates to participation in sporting clubs. And so if there are no questions, which I don't see any, I suppose we can just say good night. And thank you again for listening to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.